What's up, guys? This is Return to Tennis. I'm Aaron. Thanks for returning. What's on for today? Well, the weather's nice. It's warm. It's sunny. It's a little windy. That's okay. We'll take it. Before the rain and the cold comes back, we got to take advantage. But today we're doing something a little different because you know how much I love my vintage rackets and how big of a fan I am of older players like Andre Agassi and Boris Becker. We are going to look at the rackets today played or used by Boris Becker, endorsed by Boris Becker, and even commissioned by Boris Becker. So where do we start? Well, let's start at the beginning. His first Wimbledon win at 17, 1985. He was playing a Puma winner, right? Now, this was also the frame used by Guillermo Vilas at the time, but he was kind of towards the end of his career. Becker was the new kid. This one actually says Boris Becker winner on it. I think, in an attempt to sell more rackets, Puma decided to move Becker away from the winner towards his next racket. Now, this racket had the PCS power control system, which is an extendable handle. This one's a little different than his next racket that we're going to look at. This screw allowed the butt cap to shift more than anything else. But this was... I've not hit this. I've not strung it and hit it. It's way too heavy. Without a grip on it, it's sitting at 335 grams. No grip. Which means I throw a solid grip on it, I'm going to be in the 350 plus range. Way too heavy for me. And it's a little beat up, but I do have it in the collection. So, Puma decided they needed to sell more rackets, and now Boris is the new face. He's the hot item. He's the big star. So what they did is they issued another racket. Let me get that out of the way. Identical to the winner, and it was called the Puma Super, right? And this is probably the racket most associated with Boris Becker. When you see the color palette of the red and blue, that unique Puma head shape with that little bridge, V kind of bridge, you know this was Becker. This one actually says Boris Becker Super on it. The rumor is that this is just a repainted winner, that they just took the winner frame, painted it red and blue, called it the Super. That way they could try to still sell some rackets behind Guillermo Vilas and have Becker be pushing a totally different racket, which is actually the same racket. That's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true. I stripped this one down. Most of these rackets were far too heavy for me to be playing consistently. I stripped it down just to the pallet and put an overgrip on it. It does have the PCS system, right? The screw in it, the famous screw, just like the winner did. The difference is with this one, they changed how it went. The entire handle shifts. I actually taped this one in place. I didn't want it to move. Sometimes these screws start to fail. So I got it where it is, and I kind of taped it in place. Is it still at 27 inches? It is. Okay, so it hasn't shifted. It's still at 27 inches. This was what Becker played with, I would say, up and through the late 80s. Somewhere in the late 80s, Puma was done. They kind of shuttered their racket division. They closed it down. Boris Becker was stuck having to go somewhere else to get rackets. So it ended up being Estusa, which was a US-based company. They bought the molds from Puma and started manufacturing a whole new line of rackets for Boris Becker out of a factory in Taiwan. Those became known as the Estusa power beams. Similar color palette. This is the original power beam. The red is not exactly the same. The blue is not exactly the same on the original power beam. This was like the last racket I played before my 20-plus year hiatus. I loved this racket. No PCS system, okay? No screw in the cap, doesn't move. These were supposed to be identical to the Pumas. They were manufacturing these for Becker. They were supposed to be exactly the same. They weren't. Becker played with the Estusas for about 3 to 6 months. And then he went back to his supers. He went back to the supers and just painted Estusa logos on his Pumas. Story goes that Estusa would send like 80 rackets to Becker's technician, Uli, and he would end up sending 78 of them back. He could only get 2 out of the batch that were even close that he could match. Estusa was convinced, that their rackets were exactly the same. That any difference that was between the Estusa Power Beam and the Puma Super was in Becker's head. So at one point they painted 2 of the rackets. They blacked them out. They took a Puma, they took an Estusa, they blacked them out and told Becker, which one is which? Can you tell us which is which? He hit 1 serve with each racket and knew immediately which one was the Puma. That's how in tune he was with his equipment. That was how customized and perfect his rackets had to be for him. He knew exactly which one was the Puma after 1 ball. But he did endorse Estusa for a while, for several years, and Estusa took full advantage of that. They slapped the Boris Becker name on a multitude of frames. Strangely enough, not on this one. But they also made a Power Beam Pro, which was supposed to be, I think, his racket, like what he actually played with. It wasn't. They also made a braided, which was slightly different in color. It was still the red and blue scheme, but you could see the Kevlar running through it. It had a Kevlar. It was a braided racket. You could see the braided Kevlar in the frame, a lot stiffer than the other models. And they also made one that was called a Provant. It even has his signature initials on it, BB. The Boris Becker Provant with the kinetic stabilizer systems, which also appeared in the Power Beam. This was the Provant Power Beam. A little more rounded to me, it seems, than the other one. Same color scheme as the Puma, same shape. Spec is way different. The other ones sit around 7 points headlight. They're right in that range. This one sits at 3 points. 3 points headlight. Similar in weight to the others, but it has a massive swing weight. This was spec'd out at a swing weight of 366. It is designed to absolutely plow through the ball. It's a bit of a club when it goes through. An extremely dense string pattern. I don't know if you can see the difference here between, let's say, this one and the Super, right? If you put them side by side, the string pattern seems to be a little bit tighter on the Provant. I can see the holes don't exactly line up. The Provant seems to have an extremely dense string pattern. It is an 18 by 20. But this was like one of the last frames that they made with the Becker name on it. They did make another version of this in a checkerboard color scheme. But somewhere around 1994, that was the end. Estusa was done. Becker was done with Estusa as well. And he was kind of stuck having to find rackets again. So this time he went a totally different route. And he commissioned, is how I've read and researched and discovered, is he commissioned Head to make him rackets. And he had them press 500 pieces for him to exactly his specs before customization, which is a key thing there. In addition to those 500, he had them press another 3,100 pieces that were sold in Germany through a German sporting goods store. This one is number 2,916 of that. They were called Boris Becker World Champions. What Head basically did is they just copied the Super mold. They made their own mold at their facility in Kennelbach, Austria, and they pressed his rackets to his exact specs. Now, there are the exact specs that he wanted before customizing, which is a key thing, because Becker, I've heard, customized his rackets based on the playing environment. Indoor, outdoor, grass, clay, hard court, whatever the surface and the situation was dictated how he would customize the frames or how he would have his technician customize them. And an interesting thing with the Head versions, as you can see, there we go, right here and down here, right on the inside of the frame, you see marks of silver. There's more down here at the 4 and 7 positions. Those silver markings were basically guidelines of where he wanted lead to be placed. He didn't want the lead to be even a millimeter longer or shorter than these lines. And Uli, his technician, would customize the frames per his request. I actually have 2 of these. That's why one of them's strung, the other one's in storage. Absolutely gorgeous racket. Looks exactly like the Puma, but you'll notice no markings. These were manufactured by Head, but they were designed to basically not for retail sale. Becker took them, and he had a retailer in Germany sell them directly. It does have the screw in the handle, because that's what he liked, that's what he was used to, but it doesn't actually slide. It's just cosmetic. They couldn't copy the PCS handle system. I do know this is in fact a Head frame, because when I stripped it down to lighten it up for myself, it has a Head pallet with a pallet code on it. So it's definitely a Head frame. We're gonna hit all these side by side today. The weather's great, we should. We're gonna see, you know, how do they stack up to one another? How are they different? How do they feel? But let's get out there. Let's swing some balls. Hopefully the forehand's looking good today. We've been working on it. And we'll see how this goes. Okay, guys, here we go. We're going to kick things off with the original, the OG, the Puma Super. Now, all these rackets have similar specs in terms of length and head size, 27 square inches, 92 square inch head. Where they're going to differ somewhat is going to be flex for the most part, and some of the balance. Now the Super is probably going to be the most flexible of the bunch. It is an older frame, and it's probably a little fatigued anyway. But I gotta say, it feels extremely comfortable, very solid feeling racket. Mishits aren't great. The sweet spot is really small. So if you hit it clean, it's fantastic. If you hit it a little off, there's no telling what you'll get. That ball landed in. Doesn't have a lot of power, it seems. At least I can't get much out of it on the backhand. I can hit nice, precise shots, but I really can't feel like I drive them too well. I almost feel like I can swing almost as hard as I want. As long as I hit it with a nice motion, the ball will land in. It's crazy that Becker was known as Boom Boom for his huge serve, and he was accomplishing that with this tiny head racket, 92 square inches, and he was hitting absolute bullets. Forehands feel really nice with this, actually. Really nice, extremely comfortable, surprisingly powerful when you hit it clean dead center in the strings. When you hit it right in the middle, right in the sweet spot, you can really drive the ball pretty well with this racket. I was kind of surprised at how much power it did have for such a small size. But again, you had to be like right on the sweet spot with it. You couldn't be off. Even off a little bit, you could still hit decent shots with it, but they would lose quite a bit of pace comparatively. But overall, just a really comfortable racket. Like that felt really good. But then that one's a little off, so back foot again. A little jammed on that one. What's crazy is even on some of the balls where I get a little jammed, they still land in. Just the bracket just doesn't have a lot of pop, so you know, even a badly hit ball can still end up in the court. Ooh, just maybe on the other side of the net would be a bit better. Bad run here. There we go. Back on track. Still on the back foot a little too often. But ultra comfortable. I mean, surprisingly so. The Pumas were 50% fiberglass and 50% graphite. They had a 50-50 composition. They were kind of heavy. Again, I reduced the weights on these by stripping the pallet down and just putting an overgrip on them. It's sitting at about 343 grams right now with just an overgrip on it. That's how heavy these rackets were. But just really comfortable feeling frame. We're hitting about between 50 to 60 balls a racket. We're not going to hit full bags. That would turn this into like a 40-minute video. Actually, probably longer than that. Overall, really like the Puma Super. Felt super comfortable. Really good power when you hit it dead on in the string bed. But we're going to switch it out. We're going to grab the Estusa Power Beam next, the original Power Beam. And we're going to see how that plays. Again, same head size, same head shape, same frame mold. Good start on the backhand side. This was the last racket I played before I took my long break. Playing it immediately behind the Puma Super, it's a huge difference. It feels like a completely different racket in terms of how it feels. Like, it's supposed to be built like the Super, but it does not feel like the Super at all. The Super feels more comfortable. The Super feels more solid in the frame itself. It has a better dampening of vibration, the Super does, than the Estusa. Completely different feel for the rack between the two. The Super is more flexible. The Estusa is a few points more stiff. It's not by any means a stiff racket, but it is stiffer than the Super. There we go. And I kind of feel like it doesn't even have the same amount of power as the Puma Super does. If Estusa was putting rackets out like this, side by side to the Pumas, I could tell why Becker could feel the difference in me. I could feel the difference. If you blacked out the Puma and you blacked out the Estusa and handed it to me, I could probably tell you the difference. There's such a distinct change in how the racket feels coming through the ball and how it sounds and how it handles vibration. That they are clearly not in the same category in terms of quality. And Puma wasn't known for having like top-notch quality. Like, they didn't. But it definitely has a more tingy kind of sound to it. And does not have the same amount of solid feel. Feels like I get vibration out of the frame a little bit, but not overall not bad. It's still very controlled. Solid. You can hit solid pace with it. But again, small sweet spot, and that's where I'm really feeling the difference is. With the Super, if I hit it clean in the sweet spot, the ball really kind of felt like it would take off. The Estusa, I get good pace out of it when I hit it clean, but not the same kind of speed, not the same kind of power. So from one Estusa, here soon we'll be moving on to another. Dead ball. Again, I've been working on the forehand. That one seemed pretty good. There we go. Put a lot of time in it. Little drop action there. Overall, not bad, but just clearly not on the same level as the Super. And it is the same weight. It is actually coming in with an overgrip on it at 343 grams, the same as the Puma Super. All right, so now we're swapping out. We are moving on to the other Estusa, the Power Beam Provant Power Beam, the Boris Becker Provant Power Beam. Now this one, spec-wise, is very different. It's only 3 points headlight. It is the least headlight of the group. The others are all around like 7 or 8 points. This one's only 3. This boasts a swing weight on spec, swing weight of 366. Weight is similar. It's sitting at about 335, or I'm sorry, 345, right in that range. But right away, I can feel a difference. Like hitting flatter is easier with this racket. It has a very tight string pattern. So flat shots come really easily. I'm getting more depth on my strokes. The balls are landing closer to the baseline than they did with the other two. This racket really plows through the ball quite well. And power is a lot easier. Pace is a lot more accessible with this. I don't even have to really swing it very hard to put the ball deep into the backcourt with some good pace on it. But it is a bit of a club to play with. I have not done anything really much with this racket in terms of point play. I've hit it on the machine. I've stayed away from it, mainly because I've hit a few serves with it, and I hit 3 or 4 serves, and I can feel it tearing on my elbow. It's pulling out my elbow immediately. It just has too much weight coming through when you swing down on it. But it does hit flat forehands or flatter forehands extremely well. Just absolutely can rip some shots with it. I would say it's, for a 92 square inch racket, it can really crush some balls. But again, if I hit the Puma Super dead center string bed, it's almost as much power as this one, which says a lot about the Puma. Ooh. Just a lot of weight coming through the head, a lot of energy transferring to the end of the racket as you swing through the ball. I mean, it's easy power, it's easy depth, it's nice. But again, it doesn't have that feel that the Puma's had. It actually feels more like the other Estusa. Vibration is more evident in the frame. It doesn't have the same level of comfort as the Puma. Again, it's stiffer than the Puma. It's probably sitting around a 62 RA. The Puma's probably sitting around like a 58 or a 57. So it's, not stiff. It's not a stiff racket. It just, is not as comfortable as the Puma is. But it can really hit depth a lot easier than the Puma does. I would actually consider playing this if it didn't yank on my arm so badly when serving. Ooh, mistimed that. Still trying to iron out the problems with the forehand. We're getting a little bit better about it. We are going to move on to the final Becker racket of the day. The Boris Becker World Champion, produced by Head at the exact specs desired by Boris Becker. So, what can I say? It's ahead. The quality is there. It does not feel like the Puma. It is the closest. It does feel closer than the Estusas do. In terms of feel and vibration control and comfort. It is closer than the Estusas, but it does not feel the same as the Puma. And some of that might be due to the weight. When Becker spec'd these, he made them at a spec that was a little lower, it seems, than the standard Pumas, and that would just allow him make it a little easier for him to customize them the frames that he wanted in the way that he wanted. So this one comes in, it's got 2 overgrips on it, and it's coming in somewhere around 333, 335 grams. So it's about 10 grams lighter than the Puma Super, but it just does not have the same kind of pop as the Super. Even if I hit it dead center in the strings, which that wasn't that, it doesn't produce the same kind of pace. The balls are a bit slower in that regard, but it still is extremely comfortable. It's more comfortable than the Estusas, for sure. It handles vibration better than the Estusas. It just doesn't have the same kind of pop. And again, that could be maybe a weight issue. It could just be that 10 grams in weight difference might really be negatively impacting the frame's ability to drive through the ball. I just kind of feel like it needs some lead around maybe 12 o'clock. Help give it some heft to pull through the ball a bit more thoroughly than it does. But it's not a bad hitting racket at all. I mean, I actually played it in point play a little bit, and I've actually played some sets with it. But again, underpowered. It definitely does not have the power that the Super has, even when hit perfectly clean. Sits about 7 points head light, very similar in that regard to the Super, but it doesn't have that solid feel that the Puma Super does. It's just not quite there. It's close. Like I said, it's closer than the Estusas, but it's not quite a Puma Super, which is unfortunate. I really miss the Puma frames, actually. Well, guys, we are getting close to winding this down. That was nice. That felt good. If it is nice where you guys are, like it is here today, be sure to get off the couch and get on the courts. Enjoy the weather while you can. I know here where I'm at, the cold and the rain is back on the forecast for later in the week. But fortunately, we were able to get out today, hit these Becker-inspired rackets. See how they feel. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I hope you learned a little bit about the history of Boris Becker and his premier sticks that he took with him everywhere. Until next time, guys, have a great day.